And we've put in residential adjacent to the single-family neighborhood. It's important to think about this because in a little bit I'm going to show you what alternative types of development we could do under the SPI without actually having to come before you. But this residential creates a strong buffer between the commercial uses that are on Kenwood Road and the single-family neighborhood. When Mr. Flume presented at the Zoning Commission meeting, he indicated that mixed use should and could only be low-intensity 1- and 2-story structures. That was based on the 2002 land use plan. As frankly, it's antiquated at this point in time. It was stated by Mr. Flume and the other authors of that plan that plan would only be relevant for 2015. Well, obviously, this is 3 years later, and based on the trustees at the time enacting the SPI overlay, the anticipation was that this site, based on its location on Kenwood Road, would become a much higher density mixed-use project. The next slide was brought up by Mr. Flume, and it concerned us having an exit from our property into the Kenwood Place development. And the concern was that traffic coming from our development would stack up at the traffic light coming out of Kenwood Place onto Kenwood Road, and would make it difficult for people to get in and out of that development. Not only based on that, but partially based on those comments, we've gotten rid of the access into Kenwood Place, and it actually makes for a much better project and arrangement for us while not creating any issues for the Kenwood Place development. So the big question and the primary concern then is traffic along Kenwood Road. So Hamilton County Engineer's Office required us to do a traffic study. That was completed several months ago and was presented at the Zoning Commission meeting. And it looked at conditions today, or in 2020, and conditions in 2040. Well, let's address 2020 first. There's no question that any development along Kenwood Road is going to increase traffic. Whether it's on our site or another site, whether it's this proposed project or another project that might happen on this site, there will be an incremental amount of traffic added to Kenwood Road. The county reviewed the 2020 data and recommended, based on the build scenario, that's our project being in place, several improvements along Kenwood Road, Happiness Way, and at other sections along Kenwood. We have agreed to complete all of those improvements. If you look at the, the next slide, there's a couple things to keep in mind too regarding these mitigation requirements that the county put on us. First of all, 350 of the vehicles that will be associated with our development are already there. They're Jewish hospital employees that are currently parking across Kenwood Road in the Kenwood Mall parking lot. Moving those over to our side of the street doesn't change much, but it does get rid of the really unsafe conditions that currently exist at Galbraith and Kenwood when those people try to cross over from the parking lot to the hospital. Another 100 to 150 vehicles are already there based on the current residents in the apartments that are on our site. The other thing that's important to understand is that the current SPI zoning, if we go to 4-story buildings, and if we put all the parking underground, could generate a development that has, instead of 1,290 cars, 1,800 cars a day.
Okay, please say that again, please.
Yeah, I'll say it, but let me back up 1 second. So one of the things about our proposed development is that the multifamily automobile use is pretty low relative to number of square feet that the apartments have. The hotel use is even lower amount of cars parked because there's only 1 car per room. allocated, and that's standard for a hotel. The use that has the highest intensity of parking is the office and the restaurants, retail, restaurants, and office. We can do a building under the current SPI. We can do 4 office buildings on that site, bring them to within 20 feet of the property lines, and we'll generate about 1,800 cars a day parking versus 1,290 that our development has. This next slide shows you the intersections along Kenwood that were evaluated in the 2020 build situation. And they range from the intersection at Galbraith and Kenwood all the way down to Montgomery and Kenwood and all the places in between there. So just to give you an idea, this is what the county required our traffic engineer to do. So this is where it gets really interesting. And we've looked at this in great detail, as has our traffic engineer, but the study also asked the engineer to look at projected traffic counts for 2040. It found that in 2040, without our development, several of the intersections along Kenwood Road failed. So regardless of whether we build this development or another development goes in here, the intersections along Kenwood Road fail. If you buy into the assumptions that were used to get to this conclusion, then there's definitely a traffic issue in 2040, but it doesn't have anything to do with whether we build or not. It's there regardless. Look at the traffic counts today and you get an idea of what's going on. In 2016, approximate numbers, traffic counts on Kenwood Road were 20,000 a day. The traffic study that was done 4 or 5 months ago had basically the same number of traffic counts. So in the last 3 years, there's been little to no increase in traffic on Kenwood Road. The 2040 counts, 36,000 approximately, is based on a 3% per year increase in the amount of traffic. Again, these numbers do not include our development, but a 3% per year increase in traffic along Kenwood Road is unusual based on the fact that in the last 3 years it hasn't increased at all. But nonetheless, that's what the study was based on. The reality is this: traffic has not increased at all over the last 3 years. Bricks and mortar retail shopping is continuing a downward trend, meaning less vehicles to shopping destinations. Uber, Lyft, and other rideshare services will continue to reduce the amount of traffic in all areas, and walkable developments like what we're proposing will reduce the number of vehicle trips. None of these trends were taken into account by the traffic engineer. So next slide, what are the likely solutions for this potential issue, assuming you buy into the fact that the assumptions were based on 3% per year increase in traffic? What are the solutions 22 years from now? In a traffic study, the county would have you believe that expanding the Kenwood Road right-of-way to 120 feet, which means 9 lanes at the intersection of Montgomery and Kenwood, would solve the problem. Based on that, 2017, the county enacted a thoroughfare plan along Kenwood Road to expand the right-of-way to 120 feet. Later, you'll hear Mr. Flume tell you that we need to comply with that. Well, this next slide shows you what the right-of-way would look like along Kenwood Road if it was expanded to 120 feet. It's not very realistic for the following reasons. Number one, this would virtually destroy businesses along the Kenwood Road corridor because of the amount of parking it would take from each of those developments. Second of all, the only way it could happen is if the county takes those properties, and the only way they can take them is to pay fair market value for them. The county does not have the money to do that, and it's unrealistic to think that based on the value of the properties along Kenwood Road, that can ever happen. The traffic study that was done also identifies an alternative solution for this problem that requires significantly less right-of-way. At the end of the day, the question regarding traffic is this. In 2020 build situation, the county has said these are the mitigation efforts that you need to take, including putting a signal at Happiness and Kenwood, widening Happiness to 3 lanes, closing off Happiness beyond our development, having a right out and right in only at our entrance to Kenwood Road with a median, not a median, a little island in the middle to keep it at right out and right in, and making other lane and turning lane and stacking lanes improvements all along Kenwood Road between Galbraith and Montgomery Road. And we have committed to do all of the recommendations that they've made. The next slide is in relationship to the question that came up about the proximity of our buildings to single-family homes. As I mentioned before, the zoning code requires a 20-foot setback from adjoining properties. Based on the concerns expressed by property owners, and we've had meetings with many of them, we have increased our setbacks to more than 41 feet along the single-family properties. For some residents, that distance has been increased to 160 feet because of our ability to acquire the 2 additional parcels and to use most of that area for a green retention basin. The next concern that came up was the size of the buildings, height. The zoning code allows for buildings 45 feet in height. As I showed you earlier, on the west end, our building starts at 30-something, I'll have to go back and look at it, and goes up to 44 feet in height. So at the far west end, our buildings are below what's allowed in the code. It steps up from there, but this is the effort that we made to get them to have more of a transition from the far western edge of the property out towards Kenwood Road. As I said originally, our concept plans had a 5-story building on the western side of the site. And so, yeah, the numbers are actually here in front of me. We go from 34 feet to 44 feet, 44.10 on that western portion. This creates a much better visual impact and pulls more residential units further from single-family residential. We had several requests for visual screening from the single-family residential, and as I mentioned before, what we're proposing is an 8-foot solid fence. And additionally, we've offered to plant 15-foot high evergreens on the homeowner's side of the fence for the homes that directly abut our property. Apartments and balconies facing Frolic and Dunedin. I spoke to this earlier, but on the north and west portion of the buildings, only the corner units have balconies. And on the far south part of the building, none of those units have walkout balconies. We had a couple of comments that a hotel will bring transients and drug traffic. First of all, this is not true. You can ask the owners of the, is it Hampton on the other side of Montgomery there? But more importantly, we're the managers for the entire development. We'll fail if we can't keep residents in our multifamily units and if we can't keep businesses in the office building. So as managers of the entire project, we cannot let this happen. Also, the documents that govern management of the property will specifically give us the right to deal with any issues like this that might occur. So we will be, while we will not own the office building most likely and will not own the hotel, we will be, based on our cooperation and management agreement with all 3 parcels, we will be in complete control of what happens at that property. And that's critical to us because our bread and butter is our multifamily, and we can't afford for them not to succeed. I mentioned the wet retention pond and the issues related to that. We've converted that to a dry detention basin. So, I've given you pretty details about the project. We've talked about the input that we've gotten from residents. And one of the things that's in your packet is the 8 or 10 pages of notes that we took from our meetings with residents starting in January of this year through to a couple of days ago. So feel free to take a look at the comments that we've gotten from residents and how we've responded to them. So the only question we really haven't looked at is, how does this development benefit Sycamore Township? And when we ask that question, we have to answer it based on all 20,000 residents in Sycamore Township, not just those whose properties are adjacent to the subject property. First of all, the township has done a great job of putting a JET in place, which allows them to generate payroll taxes. The office, hotel, and apartments will generate about $240,000 per year in revenue to the township. The hotel tax will generate about $130,000 per year for the township. So a total of $370,000 a year in additional revenue that the township can use for a variety of different things, but which also is one of the reasons why there haven't been any levy or ballot issues for increased taxes in this township. In addition to that, any development that takes place today, regardless of the jurisdiction, generally has to come to some negotiated settlement with the underlying school board. Every development generally that's done today has to negotiate some kind of payment schedule with the underlying school board. In this case, the school board is Deer Park School System, and we approached them and said, look, we're going to need your help with this development. We want to see if we can come up with an agreement with you guys that will give you more revenue than you're currently getting, but also allow us to get this project done. And we made a proposal to them. The school board came back to us and they said, you know, we think we can get there, but we got a couple issues. And they said the first issue was we're actually a little bit in deficit spending right now. We need to air condition our high school, and we need $1.2 million to do that. And they said, we'd like to have you guys go back to the drawing board and see if there's a way you can make that happen. They said the other thing that we'd like to do is you show that if there is additional value created in these properties over the next 30 years, that there could be excess cash flow available, and we'd like that excess cash flow to come to the school district. We went back to the drawing board, and basically what we did is we took the payment agreement with the school board will be over 30 years. We took payments that were going to come in the later years and figured out a way with our lender to move some of those up to today. And based on that, we were able to go back to the school board and say, okay, we found a way to do it. We will be able to make that $1.2 million payment for you. It's going to impact some of your later year cash flows, but it will give you the money that you need to take care of this problem up front.
Greg, can I ask you a question on that? Because I know there are some residents who have suggested that that there were problems with that formula. So am I understanding you're capitalizing the air conditioning on the front side from payments in later years? Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's
So
bribery.
So this is money that is theirs. This is money that is theirs, but is going to be moved to the front end of the 30-year financing versus the backside. Is that
That's
what
correct. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly right. And again, every deal that's done today, I'll give you a great example. When FC Cincinnati decided they were going to build a stadium downtown, they went in and negotiated a deal with Cincinnati Public Schools that allowed their deal to happen, but also gave additional benefits to the Cincinnati Public School System. So every development that occurs today has to go through a negotiated settlement process with the school district. And, you know, again, we made a proposal to them. They were generally in agreement, but charged us to try to go back and figure out a way to solve their more immediate problem. And what we did is we took future payments, pushed them up to the front, worked with our lender to see how we could manipulate kind of the payments that we were going to make on our debt so that we could advance that money up front.
What discussions did you have with Indian Hill Schools?
I don't believe anything else in this district.
So that's basically
Yes, it is.
where we got to.
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
It's on my go-to.
Okay, so, that's the revenue that's being generated to the school district on an average basis, an average annual basis, is about 3 times what they're taking in now. Some of those payments will change in later years as we pull some of those forward to make that initial payment. In addition to that, we're gonna be adding 400 to 500 new residents and 400 to 500 new employees to this area who will shop, eat, play, and work in the Kenwood corridor. We're going to be providing new restaurant offerings. We're also going to be providing 300 plus parking spaces for Mercy Hospital. The other thing that that'll happen from this development is that this will continue to assist the township in extending the period of time that they have not asked for a tax increase on the ballot. This will provide high-end housing options for expanding employment base here in Kenwood. And one of the things that really gets overlooked sometimes is that this project, in a similar vein to the Kenwood collection, is going to help ensure the continued success of Kenwood Town Center and the companies that are based around it. And what do I mean by that? Well, today, in today's environment, there are really 2 kinds of malls. There are those that are up here, and there's the other group, and they're really down here. And one of the reasons that the ones that are successful continue to be is that they continue to generate critical mass around them with additional housing, additional businesses, restaurants, hotels. The continual growth in the economic engine is what keeps those malls viable and allows them to be, quite frankly, in this case, one of the best malls in the region. That's not always the case. You can look at what didn't happen around Forest Air Mall and basically go into an empty building. You can look at what didn't happen in the right way at Tri-County Mall, and the results are devastating. Now, there's no guarantee that any of these projects 20 years from now are as vibrant as they are, but I can tell you from our experience and from working in different parts of the country, continuing to create rooftops, continuing to create new businesses and employment around these regional power centers are key to ensuring their success for the long term. And so that's one of the big factors in looking at this development.
Greg, before you go any further, can you go back to the previous? Oh, there we go. So you're showing new payroll taxes of $240,000 and new hotel tax revenue of $130,000 per year. Can you do you know offhand, or maybe Greg, you might know? Too many Gregs in here. Greg, you may know also. What do we generate off that property currently?
It's a Sycamore Township?
Yes.